Elias Varon was used to long days alone under alien skies. He worked as an engineer on the edges of human space, repairing old communication satellites and gathering mineral samples for trade. The barren canyon world he was on now was quiet, filled with redstone, thin winds, and the occasional call of distant flying creatures. Most people avoided this place, but Elias liked it. The silence gave him time to think, and the strange beauty of the cliffs made him feel like he was walking on a forgotten frontier. His scanner beeped faintly, pointing him toward a rare mineral deposit deeper in the canyon. Elias climbed down carefully, his boots crunching against the gravel. As he moved, he noticed faint scorch marks on the rocks like plasma fire had ripped through recently. That was unusual. No patrols or battles had been recorded here, and yet the ground carried scars of something violent. He slowed his steps, eyes scanning the path ahead until he heard it. A deep rumbling growl rolled through the canyon so low it shook his chest. Most people would have turned back. Elias hesitated, heart racing, but his curiosity won. He followed the sound and soon saw a shape collapsed against the canyon wall. At first he thought it was a rock slide. Then it moved. What lay before him was a massive beast, larger than any animal he had ever seen up close. Its scales shimmered faintly like dull metal, but they were cracked and burned. Its chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. A deep wound ran along its side, glowing faintly where plasma had torn through. Its golden eyes opened just enough to glare at him, filled with pain and warning. Elias froze, every instinct telling him to retreat. A creature this size could crush him with one swipe if it had the strength, but as he looked closer, he saw something strange. The beast was trembling. Blood, darker than human blood and thicker, dripped onto the stones. It tried to rise but collapsed again, too weak to fight. Elias realized it was dying. He took a cautious step closer, his hands raised. "Easy there," he whispered, as if the thing could understand. His voice was calm, steady, the same tone he used when calming frightened machines in the field. The beast growled, but the sound lacked power. Elias knelt a few meters away, pulling open his kit. He had tools, sealants, and med patches, designed for humans, not alien monsters, but it was better than nothing. For a long moment he stared at the supplies and then at the beast. Logic told him to leave. This was not his problem, but another part of him refused. He thought of how many times he had been stuck alone, relying on nothing but stubbornness to push through. He saw the same fight in the creature's eyes. Against reason, Elias decided he would help. He moved slowly, carefully. Each time he approached, the beast tensed, its body shifting, claws scraping weakly against the ground. He stopped short of its reach and placed food rations from his pack onto a rock, sliding them closer with a stick. The beast sniffed, eyes flicking between him and the strange food before swallowing it with effort. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Encouraged, Elias began cleaning the wound. He sprayed a sealant over the burned edges, the foam hissing as it bonded to the bleeding tissue. The beast snarled at the sting, its head jerking toward him, and for a moment Elias thought it would lunge. Instead, it slumped back, breathing heavy as though too tired to fight. Elias kept working, whispering softly, "Stay with me. You're not done yet." The hours passed slowly. Elias gathered water from his canteen, tilting it carefully near the beast's mouth. At first it resisted, then its long tongue flicked out, lapping weakly. He patched what he could, wrapping fabric around scorched scales and setting small charge lamps nearby to give warmth against the cooling night. All the while he felt its eyes on him, glowing faint in the dark. When he finally sat back exhausted, the creature was still alive. Its breaths were steadier, though pain still shook its body. Elias leaned against the canyon wall, watching the stars appear above. He didn't know what kind of beast this was, or why it had been attacked. All he knew was that he couldn't walk away. He had seen men and machines left for dead in forgotten places, and he had promised himself long ago never to turn his back if he could help. As sleep tugged at his eyes, Elias glanced once more at the giant form resting only a few paces away. In its golden eyes he thought he saw something change, not just pain or instinct, but a flicker of understanding. The beast did not attack. It did not drive him away. Instead, it closed its eyes as though allowing him to stay. Elias let out a slow breath. He had no idea what he had just gotten himself into. But in the quiet canyon under alien stars, man and beast shared a fragile truce. Somewhere deep inside, Elias felt this was the beginning of something far larger than he could imagine. The next morning came quietly, with pale sunlight spilling into the canyon. Elias woke up stiff and sore from sleeping against the stone wall. His eyes went first to the great beast lying nearby. For a moment he wondered if the night had been some strange dream, but then the creature stirred, lifting its heavy head and looking at him with glowing golden eyes. The wound still looked severe, but it was breathing more evenly now. Against all odds, it had survived the night. Elias stood slowly, careful not to startle it, and checked the makeshift bandages. Some of the sealant had held, though parts of it were cracked. He would need to replace them. The beast rumbled low in its throat as he leaned closer, but it no longer looked ready to strike. Instead, it watched him, tense but calm enough to let him work. Elias spoke softly, his voice carrying the same steady tone he had used the day before. "I'm just trying to help you, big one. If you were going to eat me, you would have done it already." The words meant nothing to the creature, but speaking them gave Elias courage. He began applying fresh patches, wiping away blood with strips of fabric from his own uniform. The beast winced and growled when the sting grew too sharp, but it did not lash out. For a man used to fixing machines, not living things, Elias found himself strangely focused. Every motion mattered. Every decision could mean life or death for both of them. By midday, he paused to drink from his canteen. He was running low, and that worried him. The beast needed water too, and far more of it than he could carry. He left his tools for a moment and climbed down the canyon toward a trickling stream he had noticed earlier. Filling containers took time, but when he returned, he saw the creature had not moved. It lifted its head weakly as he poured water into a shallow dish made from his cut-pack lid. After a long hesitation, the beast lowered its snout and began to drink. Elias smiled faintly as though a wall had been broken between them. The next few days formed a pattern. Elias brought water and food. Sometimes processed rations, sometimes strange fruit from canyon plants that he tested cautiously before offering. The beast ate slowly at first, but each day it grew a little stronger. It began shifting its massive body to sit upright, its scales gleaming faintly in the sun. It still carried pain, but now its eyes followed Elias closely, not with wild distrust but with a kind of searching awareness. One evening, as the sky turned deep orange, Elias sat near the beast and spoke aloud, even though he knew it could not answer. He told it about the stations he had worked on, about the endless repairs he had done for ships that barely thanked him afterward. He talked about Earth, the blue skies he had not seen in years, and the old promise he had made to his younger self never to abandon someone or something in need. The beast listened in silence, its head tilted slightly as though the rhythm of his voice mattered more than the meaning. The bond between them grew quietly. Elias noticed that when he approached now, the beast no longer bared its teeth. Sometimes when shadows passed overhead, birds or distant ships, the creature would shift closer to him instead of away. Once, when Elias stumbled while carrying water, the beast made a low sound, not quite a growl, almost like concern. Elias found himself laughing at the thought. "You're starting to like me, aren't you?" Still, he knew this was dangerous. He had no idea what kind of beast this was, or what had wounded it so badly. Plasma burns like the ones it carried were not the marks of natural predators. Something had attacked it with weapons meant for war. That meant someone wanted it dead. Elias kept this thought buried in the back of his mind, but he could not shake the feeling that he was sitting beside a mystery far larger than himself. On the 5th day, he saw the beast attempt to stand. It pushed against the rock with its heavy claws, muscles trembling with effort. Elias held his breath as it rose halfway, then collapsed with a growl of pain. Dust scattered across the canyon floor. The beast lowered its head, frustrated, but Elias stepped forward quickly, patting its armored scales with his bare hand. "Easy, you'll get there. One step at a time." The contact lasted only a second, but it was enough. The beast's eyes widened faintly and it did not pull away. From that moment, the wall between them felt thinner. Elias knew that if it had wanted, it could have crushed him without effort, but it chose not to. In its gaze, he sensed recognition, not just of his presence, but of his intent. That night, Elias lay awake watching the stars. He thought about the choices he had made. Any rational man would have left the beast to die and walked away, but something in him refused to do that. He felt a strange loyalty now, as though saving this life mattered more than any job or supply run. He didn't know what the creature truly was. He didn't know if helping it would bring danger. But as the cool wind swept through the canyon and the great beast shifted closer to the warmth of his camp light, Elias knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just repairing a wounded animal. He was building a bond, fragile but real, with something far beyond his understanding. In that quiet canyon, under stars that belonged to no one, a human and an alien beast had begun to trust each other. And though Elias could not see the future, deep inside he knew this bond would change everything. The canyon felt less empty now. Elias had grown used to the sound of the beast's steady breathing, the way its golden eyes followed him as he moved about the camp. Days had passed and the creature's wounds were closing little by little. Its scales were duller around the burns, but the strength was returning to its body. Elias could see it in the way it shifted, the way its muscles flexed as it tried to rise each day. One afternoon, while adjusting the bandages, Elias noticed something strange. His fingers brushed against a hard ridge beneath the creature's scales near its neck. At first he thought it was scar tissue, but when he leaned closer he saw the glint of metal. Carefully, he pressed around it and revealed a circular device embedded between the scales. It looked like a collar, though not like any simple chain. This was advanced, crafted from alloy with faint inscriptions glowing faint blue. Elias sat back, frowning. He pulled his portable scanner from his kit and ran a slow scan. The device emitted a faint signal, encrypted but still traceable. The readings shocked him. The collar bore the crest of House Veyron. Even a frontier engineer like Elias had heard of them. They were one of the most powerful ruling dynasties in this sector, known for their wealth, their iron grip on trade routes, and their merciless control. And more importantly, their leader was Baroness Veyron herself, a figure whose name carried both fear and respect across the stars. The realization sank heavy in his chest. This beast was not wild. It was not some nameless predator struggling to survive. It was property. And not just any property. It belonged to the Baroness, the kind of woman who would not forgive anyone for touching what was hers. Elias looked back at the creature, which lifted its head slowly and blinked at him. It didn't know or didn't care about the metal lodged in its neck. To it, he was just the man who had fed it, who had stayed when others might have left. But Elias could not ignore what he had found. By saving this beast, he had unknowingly placed himself in the center of something dangerous. For the rest of the day, his thoughts churned. Should he leave? Should he abandon the creature now before someone came looking? He imagined the Baroness's soldiers arriving in sleek ships, scanning the canyon, demanding to know who had dared interfere. If they found him with her prized beast, they would not thank him for saving it. They would kill him for daring to touch it. Yet each time he considered walking away, he looked at the beast and felt the same stubborn pull. The loyalty he had given it could not simply vanish. Leaving it now felt like betrayal. He had started something and his heart refused to let him quit. That evening, Elias sat near the fire, his gaze on the stars above. The beast lay close by, eyes glowing faintly in the shadows. He sighed, speaking as though it could understand. You're not just some animal, are you? You belong to someone powerful, someone who probably thinks your life is worth more than mine. If they find me with you, it'll be the end of me. The beast made a low sound, deep and steady, almost like an answer. Elias shook his head and gave a tired laugh. And yet I can't leave you. What does that say about me, huh? The days that followed only deepened his conflict. The beast was healing faster now. It managed to stand for longer moments, though its movements were still shaky. Each time it rose, Elias stayed close, ready to steady it if needed, though he knew his strength was nothing compared to its size. Slowly, the canyon became a place of routine, feeding, tending wounds, resting. But always in the back of his mind, Elias wondered when the world outside would notice what had happened here. His answer came sooner than expected. One morning, the scanner in his pack lit up with a faint pulse. It had picked up signals, ships entering the atmosphere. Not ordinary ships. Their transponders carried the same crest as the collar. House Veyron. Elias's heart pounded. They were searching. He scrambled to shut off the scanner, his hand shaking slightly. The beast raised its head at his sudden movements, golden eyes narrowing as though it sensed his fear. Elias whispered quickly, "They're coming for you. Maybe for both of us." Panic pressed at him, but he forced himself to breathe. He had two choices. He could hide and let them take the beast, or he could stand his ground. Logic screamed at him to step aside. The soldiers of the Baroness were not people to defy. But when he looked at the beast, the memory of its trembling body and pained eyes filled his mind. He remembered the way it had let him touch it, the way it had chosen not to harm him even in weakness. Elias clenched his fists. He didn't know why, but he felt certain. If the soldiers came to end this creature, he would not allow it. He would not undo everything he had fought for in the canyon. Above, the faint roar of engines echoed across the cliffs. Dust stirred in the distance as ships descended. Elias stood slowly, his gaze fixed on the approaching sound. The beast shifted beside him, growling low, its strength returning with each passing hour. The moment he had feared was here. Elias had saved a life without knowing whose it was. Now the price of that choice was about to arrive. The ships came down like shadows cutting across the sky. Elias watched from the canyon floor as 3 sleek crafts descended, their engines roaring and dust swirling around the landing zone. The crest of House Varen gleamed bright on their hulls. Even from this distance, Elias felt the weight of power pressing against him. These were not traders or miners. These were soldiers of the Baroness. The beast at his side growled low, its golden eyes narrowing at the sight. Though still weak, it shifted its weight, pressing claws into the ground as though preparing to defend itself. Elias felt the sound rumble through his chest, and for a moment, he realized how strange this had become. A human and an alien beast waiting together as enemies arrived. Figures emerged from the ships, armored in plates of silver and black. Their helmets reflected the sunlight, and each carried a long weapon, humming faintly with plasma energy. Elias counted at least a dozen. They moved in disciplined formation, spreading out across the canyon, scanning the rocks with handheld devices. The way they moved told Elias everything. These were hunters, not simple guards. They were trained to track and kill. He ducked behind a boulder, his mind racing. He could still leave. If he slipped into the narrow passages of the canyon, he might escape before they saw him. But as he glanced back at the beast lying close to his camp, he knew he couldn't. Without him, it would be found and destroyed, and the thought of that felt wrong. He had given his time, his food, his care. He had made a promise to himself never to abandon those who needed him. If he ran now, he would break that promise. The hunters' voices echoed through the canyon, harsh and cold. Their leader raised a hand and spoke loudly. The Baroness's warbeast was tracked to this region. Find it. If it is too damaged to return, end it here. Elias's heart tightened. They weren't here to save the creature. They were here to finish it off. To them, it was just another tool that had outlived its usefulness. He looked at the beast, which lifted its head, teeth bared, growling deep enough to shake dust from the stone. The soldiers were closing in. Elias knew he had only moments to act. He pulled his pack close and dug through his supplies. He had tools, charges, spare wires, a welder. They weren't weapons, but with enough imagination they could be. Elias quickly strapped a small charge to the base of a boulder, setting the timer. He placed another along the canyon wall where the soldiers would pass. His hands moved fast, guided by the same instincts he used when repairing stations under pressure. The difference was that this time lives depended on it. The hunters advanced steadily. One of them found traces of blood near the rocks and called out. They began to follow the trail directly toward the camp. Elias whispered to the beast, his voice steady despite the fear twisting in his stomach. Stay low. Don't move until I give the signal. The beast's eyes flicked to him, and though it could not understand words, something in his tone seemed to reach it. It crouched lower, its body tense and ready. The first soldiers entered the narrow pass. Elias triggered the charge. With a thunderous crack, the boulder collapsed, blocking the path and scattering them. Shouts rang out as dust filled the air. Plasma bolts lit the canyon, striking stone and sending sparks flying. Elias ducked, heart hammering, and sprinted to his next position. Another squad moved along the opposite side, trying to flank. Elias grabbed his welder and aimed the stream of fire at a cluster of dried brush and rocks. Flames roared up, forcing the soldiers to scatter. He wasn't a fighter, but he knew how to use the land. Every trick, every improvised trap, bought him and the beast a little more time. The soldiers regrouped quickly. They weren't amateurs. Their leader barked orders, and soon they began pressing forward again, weapons raised. Elias braced for the worst when the beast finally moved. With a roar that shook the canyon walls, the creature surged to its feet. Though still weak, its massive body crashed into the soldiers with terrifying force. One was flung aside like a doll, another thrown against the canyon wall. Plasma bolts fired wildly, some scorching its scales, but the beast pressed on, claws tearing through the rocky ground as it drove them back. Elias scrambled to support, throwing another charge onto the path and detonating it with a flash that blinded the squad. Together, man and beast pushed the hunters into retreat. The last few fired desperately as they fell back toward their ships, dragging their wounded with them. The leader shouted for withdrawal, his voice tight with frustration. Within minutes, the soldiers were gone, their ships lifting into the sky, leaving only silence behind. Elias leaned against a rock, panting, sweat running down his face. His hands shook from the adrenaline, but he was alive. Beside him, the beast stood tall, blood seeping from fresh burns, but its eyes burning brighter than ever. Elias looked up at it, breathless. "We did it," he whispered. "We actually did it." The beast lowered its head almost like a nod before collapsing heavily onto the ground to rest. Elias rushed to its side, checking the wounds, applying sealant again with trembling hands. He felt both relief and dread. They had survived the hunters, but their escape meant only one thing. The Baroness herself would hear of this. The canyon was quiet again, but the silence felt heavier than before. Elias sat with his back against the rock, trying to steady his breath. His ears still rang from the explosions and his muscles ached from running and fighting. The beast lay near him, its sides rising and falling with deep, strained breaths. Fresh burns marked its scales, but the fire in its golden eyes had not dimmed. Elias could not help but feel pride. Against trained hunters, they had stood together and survived. Still, his thoughts turned quickly to the truth. Those soldiers would not simply vanish. They would return with reports of what had happened here. And once the Baroness herself learned that a human had interfered, things would grow far worse. Elias knew he had not just saved a beast. He had defied a power far greater than himself. The next day, Elias worked tirelessly. He repaired what damage he could to the beast's wounds, wrapping fabric around scorched patches and applying every drop of sealant he had left. He also walked the canyon, collecting what supplies he could find. The hunters had dropped equipment in their retreat, plasma packs, ration bars, broken scanners. Elias salvaged everything. He needed to be ready. The beast followed him with its eyes as he worked. When Elias dragged the heavier pieces of equipment, the creature shifted weakly, as if wanting to help but unable to rise again yet. Elias paused once, meeting its gaze. "Don't worry," he said softly. "You've already done more than I ever expected. It's my turn now." By the third day after the attack, Elias began preparing defenses. He set traps along the narrow paths, stone falls, hidden charges, and false trails to confuse trackers. He reinforced the camp, stacking rocks and scrap into makeshift barriers. He knew it might not be enough against real soldiers, but doing nothing was worse. His mind worked the way it always did when fixing machines, piece by piece, problem by problem, until something strong enough took shape. The beast slowly regained strength. It began to rise for longer moments, its steps shaky but determined. Elias stood nearby each time, ready to steady it, though he knew he could not truly hold its weight. Still, his presence seemed to encourage the creature. Its growls grew louder, no longer sounds of pain but of warning. When small predators skulked near the canyon, the beast raised its head and roared, sending them fleeing into the shadows. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Elias sat by the fire staring into the flames. His thoughts wandered back to the day he had found the beast lying broken on the stone. He remembered his choice to stay, even when logic told him to run. Now sitting beside the same creature that had fought at his side, he felt a bond stronger than words. He spoke aloud, knowing the beast could not answer but feeling the need to share. "You and I shouldn't be here. We shouldn't have survived those hunters, but we did. Not because I'm strong, and not because you're unstoppable, but because we didn't give up on each other." The beast shifted closer, lowering its great head near the firelight. Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what makes us both different. We don't quit. Not when it matters." The peace did not last. 2 days later, Elias heard the hum of ships again. This time it was louder, deeper, like thunder rolling through the sky. He climbed the canyon wall and looked out. His heart sank. A much larger craft was descending, its massive shadow stretching across the cliffs. Sleek and black, lined with glowing silver markings, it bore the unmistakable crest of House Varen. This was not a patrol ship. This was a flagship. Elias climbed down quickly, his chest tight with dread. He ran to the beast, which already sensed the threat, growling low as its eyes fixed on the sky. Elias placed a hand on its scales. "They've sent her, haven't they?" "The Baroness." The beast's growl deepened, vibrating through the ground itself. Elias felt the weight of what was coming. This was no longer a fight against soldiers. It was a confrontation with the ruler herself, the woman whose power stretched across entire star systems. And he was just one man standing in a canyon with a wounded beast. As the flagship descended, stirring dust and shaking stone, Elias felt fear claw at his chest. But alongside the fear was a strange calm. He had made his choice long ago. The moment he decided to save the creature instead of leaving it to die, he would not step aside now. He would stand, even if the Baroness herself demanded otherwise. The beast rose to its feet, shaky but proud, towering beside him. Together they faced the growing storm of dust as the great ship settled onto the canyon floor. The engines faded, leaving only silence. Then a ramp extended and armored guards marched out in perfect formation. At their center walked a tall figure draped in flowing dark robes, her presence commanding, her every step carrying authority. Elias's breath caught. He did not need an introduction. This was the Baroness Sarath Varen. The ramp of the flagship touched the canyon floor with a heavy clang. Dust swirled as the soldiers of House Veyran stepped forward, their armor polished and sharp, their weapons gleaming with energy. They moved like shadows, precise and silent, forming a circle at the base of the ship. Then with slow and deliberate steps, the Baroness herself appeared. Baroness Sarath Veyran was taller than Elias had imagined, her figure wrapped in a dark cloak lined with silver. Her face was stern, marked with sharp beauty and colder eyes. Every motion carried authority, and even the air seemed to bow under her presence. She did not rush. She did not need to. Power followed her like a shadow. Elias stood near the beast, his hands trembling but steady enough to stay at his sides. He felt small under her gaze, smaller than he had ever felt before. But he did not step back. The beast beside him growled low, its golden eyes fixed on her, its body tense though still weakened from its wounds. The Baroness stopped several paces away, her soldiers waiting in silence behind her. She studied Elias with a look that cut through him like a blade. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, smooth, but filled with weight. "You, a human. You stand beside my beast as if it belongs to you. Explain yourself." Elias swallowed hard. His throat felt dry, but he forced his voice to come out steady. "I found it wounded, dying. I couldn't leave it there. I did what I could to save it." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Do you know what this creature is?" "Yes," Elias said quietly. "I know now. It belongs to you." A faint smile touched her lips, though it was not warm. "Belongs," she repeated, as if testing the word. "This war beast has been with me for many years. It has torn through armies and defended my house, and yet you, an outsider, a man of no rank, dared to touch it, to claim it, as though you had the right." Her voice grew sharper, echoing through the canyon. "Do you understand what you have done?" Elias's heart pounded, but he did not lower his gaze. "I didn't claim it," he said firmly. "I only saved it. Your soldiers came to kill it, to end its life because they thought it was too weak to survive. I couldn't let that happen. I don't walk away from something that can be saved." The Baroness studied him, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, silence hung heavy between them. The soldiers shifted slightly, waiting for her command, their hands ready on their weapons. The beast rumbled beside Elias as if sensing the tension, its body pressed low to the ground but its eyes never leaving her. Finally, the Baroness's gaze moved to the creature. "You trust this human," she said softly, almost to herself. She took a step closer. The beast growled louder, its body shaking with the effort to stand taller. To Elias's surprise, it shifted forward, positioning itself between him and the Baroness. The soldiers tensed immediately, weapons raising. But the Baroness lifted one hand and they froze. Her eyes widened slightly as she regarded the beast's protective stance. For the first time, a trace of surprise touched her face. "This is new," she murmured. "You choose him. You who never bowed to anyone but me now shield this fragile human." Elias felt his chest tighten, but he forced himself to speak. "It's not about bowing. It's about trust. I stayed when it was broken and bleeding. I gave it food, water, and care when no one else would, and it knows that. It knows I didn't see it as a weapon or property. I saw it as a life worth saving." The Baroness turned her eyes back to him, sharp as a blade. "And what does that say about you, human?" "That I don't give up on those who need me," Elias replied. His voice shook slightly, but the truth in it was clear. "Even if it costs me." The canyon fell silent again. The soldiers waited, their fingers hovering near their triggers. Elias stood firm, though fear churned in his chest. The beast remained at his side, golden eyes burning. At last, the Baroness spoke. "My soldiers were right to call you reckless. A human defying House Veyran is nothing short of madness. And yet—" She paused, her gaze flicking once more to the beast. "It seems that madness has earned you something no soldier of mine ever could. It's loyalty." Her words carried both wonder and warning. She stepped closer until she stood only a few paces from Elias. Her voice dropped lower, quieter but sharper. "Do you realize the danger you face? If I wished it, you would die here and now." Elias's heart hammered, but he lifted his chin. "Maybe. But if that's the price for saving it, then so be it." The Baroness studied him in silence, her eyes locked on his. The moment stretched long like a blade hanging over his head. Then slowly she smiled. Not cruelly this time, but with something strange, almost respectful. "You are either the bravest fool I have ever seen," she said softly, "or the wisest. I cannot decide which." She turned her gaze to the beast. "It has chosen you, and I will not break what even I cannot command." She lifted her hand, signaling her soldiers. "Stand down, weapons lowered." The air eased, though tension still hung thick. Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The beast's growl faded, though its body remained tense, ready to protect him until the very end. The Baroness gave him one last long look. "You have defied me, human, and yet I will not end you. Consider this a gift, or perhaps a test. But remember, what you carry now is more than a bond. It is a responsibility. See that you are worthy of it." With that, she turned and began walking back toward her ship, her soldiers following in silent formation. The canyon slowly emptied of their presence, leaving Elias standing alone once more. Alone except for the great beast at his side. He placed a hand gently on its scales, his voice barely above a whisper. "We did it. Somehow we're still here." The beast lowered its head, brushing lightly against his shoulder. For the first time, Elias felt not just survival, but something deeper, a bond that even power and fear could not break. The canyon was quiet once more, bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. Elias sat beside the beast, now strong enough to stand fully on its massive legs. Its golden eyes followed him, not with fear or pain, but with a steady, quiet trust that made his chest feel warm in a way he had not expected. After the encounter with the Baroness, they had survived what most would have called impossible. Elias ran a hand along the creature's scales. "You could have left me," he whispered. "You didn't, you stayed." The beast rumbled low, a sound almost like agreement. In that moment, Elias realized their bond went beyond survival. It was mutual respect forged in fire and fear, strengthened by trust. Neither human nor alien had given up when it mattered most. The days that followed were peaceful, but Elias remained cautious. He knew that word of their defiance could spread through the Baroness's networks at any time. Yet he also noticed subtle changes. The beast would no longer flinch when he moved suddenly. It nudged him when he dropped supplies, and sometimes when he spoke, it would tilt its massive head as if listening. Elias chuckled quietly. "You're learning fast," he said. "Maybe faster than I ever thought you could." Elias spent time exploring the canyon with the creature by his side. Together they found hidden springs, patches of edible plants, and small game that had survived in the harsh terrain. The beast hunted with him sometimes, moving silently, its strength and instincts aiding their survival. For the first time in weeks, Elias felt a sense of home, even in this lonely and dangerous place. One evening, a faint hum reached him from the canyon entrance. He froze, heart thudding, thinking the Baroness's forces had returned. But it was only a small ship, unmarked, carrying supplies he had requested from nearby human colonies. Relief washed over him. He realized he had been holding his breath for days, waiting for some disaster that might never come. He watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the canyon walls in deep reds and golds. The beast shifted beside him, its weight brushing lightly against his leg. He laughed softly. "You've come a long way, big guy. From dying alone in the canyon to standing here beside me, ready for whatever comes next." The creature gave a low rumble, almost like a laugh in its own way. Elias's mind drifted to the Baroness and her words. She had not punished him, nor had she taken the beast back. Instead, she had allowed him to keep what he had saved. That alone was extraordinary. He realized then why humans were unique in the galaxy. Where other species relied on rules, power, and fear, Humans valued life, trust, and courage even when it seemed foolish. That was the spark that had carried him through every danger, every trap, every battle in the canyon. The beast, sensing his thoughts, nudged him toward a narrow path leading deeper into the canyon. Elias followed. The path opened to a hidden plateau overlooking the desert below. From this vantage point, the canyon stretched endlessly, a mix of harsh cliffs and hidden valleys. He felt a thrill of possibility. Together they had survived more than anyone could have imagined, and now the world seemed full of paths waiting to be explored. Elias smiled at the creature. "We've proven something," he said. "Not just that we can survive, but that there's more to us than strength or speed. There's loyalty. There's heart. There's the choice to do right even when it's dangerous." The beast rumbled in agreement, a sound that echoed softly across the canyon walls. Night fell, bringing stars that shone like scattered diamonds across the sky. Elias lay on the ground, the beast curled nearby, its massive body providing warmth and comfort. For the first time, he felt truly connected to something beyond himself. He realized that the beast had saved him as much as he had saved it, teaching him patience, trust, and courage in ways no human companion could. In the quiet of the night, Elias understood that this bond was not about property or power, and it was not about the Baroness's control. It was about respect, choice, and the strength that came from standing together. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, filled with powers beyond imagining, but here in this canyon a human and a beast had carved a place for themselves, a place where trust and courage mattered more than fear or authority. As dawn approached, Elias stood on the edge of the plateau looking out over the canyon. The wind swept across his face, carrying the scent of stone and distant minerals. The beast stood beside him, its scales glinting faintly in the morning light. Together they faced the horizon, not as savior and saved, but as equals. Elias whispered softly, "Whatever comes next, we face it together." The beast rumbled low, and for the first time, Elias felt certain that they would be ready. No ruler, no soldier, no obstacle could undo what they had built. Humanity had its limits, but also its courage. And in the heart of this alien canyon, that courage had been proven true. And so, man and beast began the next chapter of their journey, side by side, bound not by law or ownership, but by trust, loyalty, and the unwavering choice to protect life in a universe that often did not. In the silent canyon, under the vast sky of unknown worlds, they had found more than survival. They had found something far rarer: understanding, friendship, and the proof that even in the face of overwhelming power, humans could shine brighter than anyone expected.